Most of the Beatles' songs were written by John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. Harrison contributed more to the Beatles' later work, even though McCartney and Lennon were the band's principal authors in their formative years. Since they were all in competition with one another, their creative output was usually pushed. Nevertheless, Lennon asserted that McCartney and Lennon were resentful of him because of their rivalry. Lennon says he struggled with a creative slowdown in the middle of the 1960s. He reduced the amount of songs he wrote, but in the last years of the decade, he wrote even more. Revolution was among the songs he was enthusiastic about in 1968. Sentiment didn't seem to be shared by Harrison and McCartney. "I made Revolution," which is on the LP, when George and Paul, all of them, were on vacation, Lennon stated in the Beatles anthology. "I intended to release it as a single, but they felt it lacked quality. We released Hey Jude, which was commendable, but we could have had more." More than the song itself, Lennon said he thought they were responding to the band's typically tense dynamic. The song was recorded twice by use. Lennon stated, "The Beatles were growing really tense with each other. George and Paul were enraged and complained that it wasn't done quickly enough on the first take. Maybe if you elaborate on the specifics of what a hit record is and isn't." However, the Beatles could have afforded to release the more reflective, slower version of Revolution as a single, regardless of whether it was a wooden or gold record. However, Lennon added, "It rocked the apple cart because they were so furious with the Yoko incident and the fact that I was again being as creative and dominating as I was in the early days, after lying dormant for a number of years. They weren't acclimated to my being awake again." Lennon felt adrift in the years preceding his artistic renaissance. He composed songs that served as appeals for assistance. According to David Sheff's book, All We Are Saying, the last major interview with John Lennon and Yoko Ono. "The whole Beatle thing was just beyond comprehension. I was eating and drinking like a pig, feeling unsatisfied with my appearance, and I was secretly pleading for help." The three bandmates relied on one another to push their work forward, even though they were competitive with one another. According to a fellow student, Lennon was always clearly thrilled to collaborate with McCartney. According to Helen Anderson, a classmate of Lennon, Paul would have a school notebook and he'd be scribbling down words. Paul McCartney, The Life, Philip Norman. John was accustomed to using aggression to get his way, thus those sessions might be intense since Paul would not back down. When they were together, Paul gave John the impression of coming to life.